Hi everyone, this is Noah, and today we're going to be going over concepts from lectures 1 and 2. So let's go ahead and start off by talking about protons, neutrons, and electrons. And so, what does the protons, neutrons, and electrons tell us about an atom? Well, first off, if we look at the number of protons we have, this is also our atomic number. And this guy will tell us what element we have. And so if we look at a periodic table, we know an atomic number of 7 would be nitrogen. So we have a nitrogen atom here. Next, let's go ahead and figure out what his atomic mass is. And so this guy has an atomic mass of 14 atomic mass. So the way I was able to find this is by taking number of protons and adding the number of neutrons. And so if we look at our atom, we have 7 protons and 7 neutrons. This gives us an atomic mass of 14. And you guys might ask, well, why don't we take into account the electron's mass too? Well, if you compare the mass of an electron to the mass of a proton or neutron, the mass of an electron is very, very small. So because of this, the amount of mass that each electron adds to the atom doesn't really change it by that much. So a lot of time you can just disregard it. Most of the mass is coming from those protons and those neutrons. Cool, but what the electrons can tell us is whether or not this atom has a charge. So if we compare the number of protons, we have 7, and we know protons have a positive charge, the number of electrons that we have. 6, we have a negative sign because electrons are negatively charged. We add those guys together, gives us a +1 charge. And so we know that this nitrogen atom has a +1 charge. We can also call this guy a cation. Cation just meaning he has a positive charge. If this guy had a -1 charge instead of a +1 charge, we call him an anion. An anion just meaning an ion that has a negative charge. Cool. So let's go ahead and talk about some bonding examples next. So over here we have NaCl. And normally Na would only have 1 valence electron. Cl would go ahead and have 7. And so the 2 types of bonds that we covered were ionic and covalent. What happens in ionic is we have an electron in one atom is taken or given to another atom. So in this case, Na would lose an electron to Cl, forming a Na plus cation and a Cl minus anion. And now that this Na has a positive charge and the Cl has a negative charge, this attraction between that positive and negative charge is going to bring those 2 atoms together, forming our ionic bond. And now if we look at the molecule to the right, this guy over here is methanol. And let's try to identify the bonds present in this guy. And so this whole molecule is bonds together by covalent bonds, but we can specify what type of covalent bonds a little bit more. So if we look over here at this bond between the H and the C, this guy, we can call him a non-polar covalent bonds, because if we were to look at the electronegativity between hydrogen and carbon, there's not going to be a very big difference between those two. So because of that, there's not really going to be a partial positive or partial negative on either atom. But let's say we take a look at this OH bond right here. This guy would be considered a polar covalent bond because that oxygen atom is really, really electronegative. And so that's going to give him a partial negative charge, leaving our hydrogen right here a partial positive charge, an unequal distribution of electrons in this bond. Cool. And polar bonds leads us to a very important topic, such as hydrogen bonding. And so if we look at a very important molecule in life, water, water is able to form hydrogen bonds with itself. And hydrogen bonds are not actually a bond between atoms. They're an interaction between 2 molecules, and that's important to note And this is an attractive interaction caused by this partial negative and partial positive in these caused by these polar covalent bonds. And so if we look at this hydrogen right here, he's got a partial positive charge because has a polar covalent bond with that oxygen atom. And we know this oxygen atom down here has a partial negative charge because he's really electronegative. Because of those partial positives and partial negatives, these guys are able to form hydrogen bonds with each other. Then lastly, let's talk about water and its ability to dissociate. And so what I mean by that is that water can dissociate into H plus and OH minus. A lot of times you guys can see H plus or hydronium ions, also written as H3O plus. These guys are used interchangeably a lot of the time. And so what's important about this is that we can learn what the pH of a solution is based off the amount of hydronium atoms present or H plus ions in the solution. And the way we can do that is by using this formula right over here. This guy is really important because we can go from a concentration of hydronium and convert it into a pH. But if you're giving a pH and wanted to find the concentration of hydronium, you can go ahead and use that formula down there. And so for example, let's imagine that we were given a hydronium concentration equal to 10 to negative 8. So we can go ahead and do, if we wanted to find the pH, is plug it into that first equation in the top right. So pH equals negative log concentration of our hydronium, in this case would be 10 to the negative 8. And you can go ahead and plug that into a calculator and find out that the pH would be 8. A quick tip is that if the concentration of hydronium is 10 to the negative some value, when it's 10 to the negative some value, whatever that exponent is just going to be your pH. Makes the math a lot easier. And same thing, if I was given a pH and I wanted to find the concentration of hydronium, let's say I had a pH equal to 3, something that's really acidic, and I wanted to find what the concentration of hydronium in there was, I would go ahead and use the other equation in the top right this time. 10 to the negative, our pH in this case is 3, and so our final answer would just be the concentration of hydronium is 10 to the negative 3. Cool, I hope this helped you guys go through our worksheet that's posted on iLearn. If you guys have any more questions, please check us out during our session/office hours. Those times can be found in the iLearn page. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. And thank you guys.